afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Manage Engine's online cybersecurity webinar. My name is Niyati Bhatt, and I am a product expert with the IT security solutions team here at Manage Engine, and I'll be taking you through the topics today. I'll be talking to you today about security incident detection and response. Now, incident detection and response are both very distinct and very important aspects of network security. And yet, we see organizations struggling with both every single day, right? Businesses sometimes they take months to discover an attack in their network. In fact, once they do identify that there's an attack, they may take months again to actually investigate, find out what went wrong, and mitigate any damage that happens. Now, that's obviously not a very ideal situation. And I'll be showing you today how you can achieve very efficient and very streamlined incident detection and response using SIEM solutions. SIEM meaning security information and event management. Right, so before we get into the topics for today, very quickly, if anyone is facing any audio or video issues, please let us know using the live chat option. And if you have any questions during the course of the webinar, we will be handling them towards the end of the session. So once again, we'll be handling them via the live chat option that you see in your GoToWebinar consoles. So if you have any questions, please keep them coming and we will address them towards the end of the session. And also the recording for today's webinar will be emailed across within a couple of days, to all the registrants. So if anyone wanted to know about that, we will be emailing it to you in a few days, within this week mostly, right? So, all right. So today we'll first start by examining the overall life cycle of a typical security incident. So just so that we can appreciate how all of the various security processes work together in any organization. Then we'll discuss these three advanced methods of incident detection, and we'll close up by talking about how you can automate common incident responses and track all of these processes very efficiently. So you see here on the screen the four basic stages that any security incident goes through. Now, right up front, let me tell you, it is not as neat and sequential as I've shown here on the screen, right? This is just to sort of put it across in a very basic way, but it doesn't always have to be this sequential, right? Because, for example, sometimes when an incident is detected, you may take certain precautionary incident response measures, right? Before you start investigating it, or some of these stages may occur in parallel, things like that. But in general, this is the general flow that any security incident goes through, right? So you have incident detection, which kicks off this whole cycle, right? Maybe every day through your day-to-day auditing process or using any of these advanced incident detection methods, you may be able to identify that there is an incident in your network, all right? So now at this point, you may choose to take certain initial response measures, right? You may want to take certain basic measures as a precaution, or maybe you want to contain any potential further damage to your networks. So, right? And then once you do that, you will have to start investigating the incident, right? You have to figure out what went wrong. You want to find out which user accounts or which devices are involved in this incident. You want to identify how an attacker gained access to your network. You identify all of these kinds of things in the incident analysis stage. Now, during all of this investigation process, you will finally identify what went wrong and you will understand what sort of response measures you need to take. But before that, you may also need to take certain measures to maintain your business continuity, right? So what do I mean by that? So let's say that you are currently investigating an incident on a certain critical server which provides really important business services, right? So now to investigate or sort of correct any incident, you may need to take the server offline, which your business can't afford. So you may need to sort of first, set up a backup server, things like that. So you need to basically ensure in this stage, you need to basically ensure that your employees' work or maybe your customers' access to your business's services don't get affected, right? So you need to take such measures in this stage. And then finally, you need to take any identified response measures to actually mitigate the damage or mitigate any of the incidents in your network, right? So let's say you identify that there is an intruder or a few intruders in your network. You need to get them out, you need to block them from the network, right? Or you may identify that a specific incident was caused by a certain vulnerability, which means then you need to take steps to apply any necessary patches for that vulnerability, right? So all of that, you do all of that in the final incident response stage. And of course, all of the information that you have gained throughout this entire cycle, you can also use that to strengthen your incident detection mechanism in the future, right? So you may realize that you need certain new security alerts. You may need to modify rules of some sort, right? So you can feed back all of the information gained throughout this entire process back into your incident detection mechanism. So that's how this loop gets closed over here. And of course, you have incident management, which basically kicks in the second any incident is detected, and it sort of runs in parallel with all of these stages. It helps you stay on track of any incident that's going on in your network. It helps you manage them. It helps you understand the status of any incident at any given time, right? Sorry. So if you wish to have a strong security system in place, you need to have very well-defined solutions and processes in place for each of these stages shown here, right? And more importantly, all of those solutions, all of those processes, they need to actually work together very effortlessly, right? You don't want to be wasting time trying to transfer information from an incident detection system into your investigation tool, right? Or you don't want to waste any time. You need a very streamlined process or a streamlined flow of information. So that is why you ideally need to be using a single comprehensive solution that helps you across all of these stages, and SIM solutions are your best bet for this. So now let's start discussing incident detection and incident response in a bit more detail. So we'll start with discussing three extremely advanced incident detection methods which SIM solutions provide you with. First of which is event correlation. So to understand what event correlation is, let's consider this, right? Now we all know that a typical organizational network generates millions of events, maybe at any given time, right? It generates millions of events maybe over a couple of weeks or a couple of months, depending on the size of the network. Now, does this mean that there are millions of activities being performed in your network? No, right? It doesn't take a couple of weeks for your employees to sort of perform millions of actions on the network. It's not actually going to be like that. Now, the reason why you have so many events in your network is simply this, that any single activity that happens on your network does not just generate one single log. It actually generates an entire series of logs. It generates an entire trail of logs. Okay, so let's just take an example to understand that. Now, here you are in your organization, right? And what you want to access a certain file on a network share, right? It's a very simple task. You just want to go over to a network share and open a file. So now what would you need to do to achieve this? You need to log on to your network, right? You need to log on to your workstation. So that generates a couple of authentication logs. Then you would need to access the network share, another couple of authentication logs right over there. And finally, you go over and access the actual file. So you can see here how this is actually one task for you, but it generates an entire sequence of logs, right? And network attacks are no different. Any network attack. Now, an attacker doesn't just magically show up in your network. He doesn't just show up on your database server and steal your data. He actually leaves an entire trail of logs before the final breach event. And this is the exact fact that a technique like event correlation makes use of, right? It looks throughout your network for these kinds of sequences of logs which could identify or which could denote potential network attacks. So now how does it know that a particular sequence of logs is suspicious or is could denote an attack, right? It uses something known as correlation rules. And Log 360, our Manage Engine's SIM solution, also includes several predefined correlation rules to help you detect network attacks, right? So now a correlation rule is nothing but, um, you can think of it as a sort of template or a sequence of logs which could denote a kind of attack. All right. So let's say you ask me, what is a brute force attack? Right. So I would tell you, right, a brute force attack is nothing but, a brute force attack occurs when an attacker basically tries to forces entry to your network, right? An attacker basically tries several failed logon attempts before finally guessing the password to a system and then successfully logs on to a system in your network, right? So a brute force attack is nothing but a sequence of failed logons followed by a successful logon. So that would be a correlation rule which describes a brute force attack attempt. Or you can take another example, right? So you can see here I have one on the screen for you. So let's say an attacker tries to remotely log on to your network via the VPN, and then the attacker goes over and logs on to a specific server which hosts your database, and then they perform certain actions on the database itself, right? So you can see how correlation rules are flexible enough to really denote, or they can be used to sort of check for any kind of attack across your network. So we'll just take a couple of quick examples, which Log360 includes as predefined correlation rules within the product, right? So you can see here. So now the first example would be identifying potential malware installations in your network. Okay, so sorry. Yeah, so you can check for this sequence of events, which helps you identify when an attacker is probably trying to download malware within your network. So it would occur when they force entry through your organization's VPN, right? So they basically use a brute force mechanism to log on remotely to your network, and then they log on to a target device, and finally they install a particular software. So when this sequence of events happens in quick succession, you can be pretty sure that this is an attack attempt, and this is actually an attacker who's probably trying to install some suspicious software within your network. Similarly, you can also use a rule to check for unauthorized SQL backups, right? So if there is someone who logs on using a brute force method again to your database server, and then logs on to, to your Windows server which hosts your database, and then logs on to your database server again, and finally takes an SQL backup, right? When this sequence of events occurs, you can be pretty sure again that this is an unauthorized backup activity, right? So you have all of these available to you as predefined rules within the Log 360 product, within the event log analyzer component of Log 360. So I'm just going to show you very quickly how the correlation feature works, right? Hello. So this over here is the main correlation dashboard of the product. So this dashboard gives you a very quick one-stop look at all of the incidents in your network. Right, so you can see over here all of the suspicious incidents that have been detected within a selected time period. So now let's say you want to find out further details about a specific kind of attack. So you can do that by navigating to the report either directly from this main dashboard over here, or you can select the specific report or specific incident that you're looking for from this left menu over here, right? So let's just take a quick example. So we spoke about unauthorized SQL backups, right? So we can look at a specific report for that incident. So this is a report which gives you details about all of the occurrences of this kind of attacks. So now this is an aggregated incident report, right? So what it does is that basically it collects all of the information, all of the events that led up to a specific attack, and aggregates it within a single report for you. So now if you want to find out about any particular occurrence of this incident, simply click on event timeline, and it gives you a very neat timeline of all of the events that led up to the specific attack, right? So you can see here the exact time at which each incident happened, at which each event happened. And of course, if you would like to find out any further details, if you want to know which user was involved or which device a specific event happened on, you can always click on details, and you can look at all of the log contents over here, right? So in this way, the correlation report gives you all of the information that you need to know to identify what happened for any specific incident, right? So this really speeds up your investigation process and helps you start responding or mitigating any damage very quickly. Right, so that was event correlation. Now let's talk about threat intelligence. Okay, sorry. So, all right. So now I'll explain threat intelligence. Now I'll just put it across very simply, right? The concept of threat intelligence is just this. Sorry about that. So the concept of threat intelligence is this, right? If anyone who's already known to be malicious in some other part of the world, if now someone who's already known to be malicious turns up in your network, then it's bad news, right? So that's all it is. So that's all threat intelligence is. It's a very, very simple and powerful concept, right? So you can think about it like a sort of global most wanted list, say, right? So so there is this list of known intruders and known malicious entities from across the world, and you're using it to identify when any malicious entity turns up in your network, right? So where does this information come from? It comes to you in the form of threat feeds, right? So threat feeds are put together by certain third parties external to your organization. They collect information about threats and attacks from across the world, and they collate it within one single threat feed. They validate it, they check that this information is actually accurate, and they sort of populate all of this information within their threat feed, right? So you have several threat feeds provided by several different third parties. They could be either open source or they could be paid, right? So Log 360 collects information from highly reliable and known threat feeds and uses this information to identify when any malicious IP address or domain or URL is detected in your network, right? And all of these threat feeds are based on the STIX and TAXI protocols, which are standardized protocols used to publish threat feeds. And most of the reliable threat feeds today are based on these protocols, right? So another cool thing that Log 360 allows you to do is it allows you to add any other threat feeds which you may be subscribed to into the product, so that it immediately integrates that threat feed as well within the threat intelligence module, and it very seamlessly integrates it and starts checking for threats within your network based on that threat feed's information as well. So once again, let's just take a couple of scenarios to understand how this works. Okay. So let's say that there is a particular system within your network which comes under the control of a malicious external callback server, right? And this system attempts to send some sort of sensitive information to that server. So as soon as this happens, it when it tries to send information over to this malicious server over here, the log that it generates includes this malicious server's IP address. So log 360 or the event log component of log 360 is immediately able to identify this malicious server's IP address, and you can immediately understand that there is a certain contact attempt being made with this malicious server, and you can put a stop to it immediately, right? And in a similar fashion, if any malicious server tries contacting a device within your network, its details show up in your network logs, and you can immediately identify that there is a communication attempt being made from a malicious source within your network. All right. So once again, let's just see how this looks over on the product. So you can find all of the threat intelligence alerts under the alerts tab over here. So you can see something known as threat alerts, or you can also find it under the default threat profile based alert over here. So this over here gives you all of the information about malicious entities trying to interact with your network, right? So you can see all of the details that you need over here. So if you would like to perform any further investigation, if you would like to identify if this particular malicious IP has shown up in any other point on your network, you can always conduct an investigation. You can search for this particular IP address and find out if there are any other logs which have this particular IP address, right? So this very quickly helps you identify any activities performed by this particular IP address over here. So in this way, you can very easily find out about malicious entities interacting with your network. Now, like I told you, you can also add your own thread feeds into within the product, right? So you can do that by just going over to settings, right? So you can click on threat management, and you can also very easily just click on add new server and just provide the details of your specific threat server, and also provide the necessary credentials, and mention how often you would like to retrieve the latest threat information from that server, right, by mentioning the schedule over here. So once you add the server, log 360 or the event log component of log 360 very seamlessly integrates this new server as well within the threat intelligence module, and starts collecting information from the server and giving you alerts for any malicious entities detected according to the information from this threat feed as well. Now, the final incident detection method that we are going to be talking about is user and entity behavior analytics. So now UEBA, right? This is a method, incident detection method, which does not require any preset rules or any external information like threat feeds to identify that there is something wrong in your network, right? How it instead works is it uses machine learning to sort of analyze how your network functions on a normal basis, and it uses that information. So whenever anything deviates from this normal behavior, it identifies that as an anomaly, and it immediately lets you know that something suspicious is happening in your network, right? So there are two concepts that I'd like to explain over here very quickly related to how UEBA works, right? So that would be baselining and risk scoring, right? So what UEBA does, what the UEBA algorithm does, is that it builds a security baseline for every single user and every single device in your network, right? It identifies what happens on a normal basis on any given day in your network, right? So how many times does a particular user log on? How many files do they access? Which devices do they interact with the most? Or how many queries are performed on a specific database server, right? All of this information is captured within a single baseline. And when any deviation happens from this baseline, it flags that as an anomaly and assigns that anomaly a specific risk score, right? So that is basically how the overall thing works, but I'd like to make it more clear by sort of explaining all of this with an example, so that it's much easier to sort of understand, right? So log 360's UEBA module identifies anomalies, or like I said, deviations from the baseline based on three kinds of anomalies, right? It identifies three kinds of anomalies, namely pattern, time, and count based anomalies. So let's just take a simple example over here. I've listed three employee names over here, the departments they work with. These are their regular work times, and I've also listed the devices that they usually work with, right? So now, now that you have this information, let's consider this. Okay, so what happens if the user John, right, who usually works with machines A, B, and C, what if this particular user one day tries to connect to server D, right? So this is something that is happening for the first time. This is something completely unexpected from John. So this would be counted as a pattern anomaly. Now, similarly, what happens if James, who is known to work from 3 in the afternoon till midnight, what happens if he suddenly one day connects to your network at 6 in the morning? So this is happening at an unexpected time, which means it is a time anomaly, right? Similarly, you have Jake, who's an IT administrator, right? So he may be performing a certain number of activities per day, right? Let's say he executes 20 queries on a database server on any given day. But one fine day, he so happens to execute 200 queries, right? That's 10 times the usual volume of activity expected from Jake. So if this sort of situation happens where the overall volume of activity is unexpected, that is when you have a count anomaly, right? So anytime any one of these kinds of anomalies occurs, each of these anomalies is assigned a specific risk score, and the user or device associated with that anomaly also gets an overall risk score based on all of the various deviations that they're involved in, right? So now again, I'll give you one more example to explain that in a little more detail, right? So let's say you have this particular contract engineer working for your organization, right? Let's call him Steve. So Steve is one day informed that his contract is not being renewed, and he's not very happy about that. So once he's informed about this, at 9 in the night, what he does is he goes over and accesses some certain design specifications, right? And this, since this is happening at an odd hour in the night, the UAPA module records a time anomaly, right? So because of this, Steve's risk score gets increased by a bit, right? Now, half an hour later, Steve starts performing an unusual volume of activity, right? So he starts reading and changing multiple documents at 9:30 in the night. So since this is an unusual volume of activity occurring at an odd time, you have both a time and a count anomaly occurring over here. Now, each of these anomalies have a risk score associated with it, and Steve, who is by now associated with a series of anomalies over here, the overall risk score for Steve is constantly increasing over here, right? So finally, what Steve does is that he accesses the customer database, which obviously contains very sensitive customer information. He downloads all of the data onto a removable device, and this is something that he's never done before. He's never been involved in anything where he uses a removable device or a USB device. So this is a pattern anomaly, right? So all of these are recorded as deviations from Steve's baseline, and over the course of a single hour, Steve's risk score completely jumps because he is involved in so many different deviant activities, right? Also, another cool thing that Log 360's UABA module does is that it classifies every single kind of anomaly into three specific kinds of threats, right? You have insider threats, data exfiltration, as well as you have insider threats, data exfiltration, and compromised accounts. So you can also find information for any of these kinds of threats as well. So I'll just quickly show you how the UEPA module looks on the product. So this is the overall UEBA dashboard for Log 360, right? So this dashboard gives you a lot of interesting information. So Like I said, you have risk scores attributed to every user or entity or device on your network, right? So on this dashboard, you can very easily find out the most, all the users in your network who have the highest risk scores, right? So these are the top 10 users according to their risk score. And you can also find out, let's say, if any particular user has recently shown a sudden jump in their risk score, right? So in the example that we just discussed about Steve, you would see Steve showing up on this graph over here because his risk score would have suddenly jumped, right? So you can very easily and immediately find out that there is some sort of suspicious activity going on over here. So let's say now you would like to identify why a specific user has the kind of risk score that they do. So I'm concerned about this particular administrator user, and I want to know why this user has such a high risk score of 51. So I can just click on this graph over here. Okay, so my connection is slow, it's not loading right now, but basically you can just click on any particular user and it loads a report for you, which basically shows you the list of all anomalies that that particular user was involved in. You can get all the specific details about what was expected and what happened instead. You can drill down and find out very specific information about all of the suspicious activity that any particular user is involved in, right? Also, you can even add any users whom you're concerned about onto a watch list, right? So you can just add them over here, and then you can just find out any particular details about all of these users, watch listed users from here, right? So you can do all of this from this one single dashboard. And of course, you can also drill down your dashboard according to these three kinds of threats that you have that I spoke about, right? Insider threats, data exfiltration, and compromised accounts. So this is how the UEBA module works, right? So now we've discussed all of these advanced incident detection methods, right? So that's great. You've used all of these advanced methods and you have identified all sorts of, difficult to identify threats in your network, and that's great, right? So you've identified attacks in your network, but what comes next, right? What comes after that? Is it enough to stop once you have identified a network incident, right? It isn't. You obviously need to do a whole lot of work beyond that as well. So there is this common misconception that SIM solutions are only used or are only good for detecting security incidents in your network. But the truth is, they take you beyond simple incident detection as well. Like I told you in the previous slide, where we talked about the security incident lifecycle, SIM solutions are comprehensive tools that actually help you across the entire security lifecycle. They help you with all of those stages that we discussed, right? They help you with incident detection, as we just discussed, using all of these advanced methods. They help you investigate and respond to any incident, and they also help you manage the entire process, right? So when it comes to incident response, SIM solutions help you automate your incident response, right? And that's something that's really great. You don't have to waste time sort of manually responding to any incident. SIM solutions can actually do it for you by using highly customized, highly flexible workflows to respond to specific incidents, right? So you can automate your entire incident response mechanism using these workflows. And of course, you can also conduct very, very in-depth forensic investigations into any specific security incident in your network using the search module available to you, right? You can search through millions of events to identify the root cause of any incident. You can identify what went wrong, how a particular attacker gained access to a sensitive database resource, things like that. And across all of these stages, right, you can also use SIM's incident management features to very easily track the entire process and stay on top of any network incident being investigated in your network. So I'm just going to show you all of the various features that a SIM tool gives you to very easily investigate, I mean, to very easily respond and manage any incident, right? So, on, sorry about that. Right. So this is your central incident dashboard over on the event log component of log 360. This dashboard gives you an overall look at all of the various incidents in your network. All right. So first, I want to discuss the incident response features, and then we will come back over here and discuss how you can manage all of these hundreds of incidents in your network. Okay. So let's take a simple example. All right. So I'll take you over through the entire process, through the sort of entire flow that you have. So let's say that I have this really sensitive server in my network, all right? And what I'd like to do is I want to set up an alert which tells me when a removable device or when a USB device, right, is plugged into this server during non-working hours. So let's say I have a specific sensitive server, like I said. So this is my critical server that I have, and I want to create an alert which tells me when a USB device is plugged into this server, right? So I have this predefined alert available to me, and I just select and set up this alert, right? And like I said, I also want to know about this when it's happening during my non-working hours, right? So maybe during the working hours, if this particular event happens, it's not that suspicious, but I definitely want to know about it if it happens at an unexpected time, like a non-working hour, right? So this is my alert setup over here. But now let's just think about this practically, right? Now I'm the administrator and I get this alert at 3 in the morning, right? Now, obviously, I'm not going to be in a position to do something about it immediately, right? And in that time, a potential attacker could very easily get away with sensitive data from the server that I have, all right? So I want to prevent this. And to do that, I can very easily set up a workflow to sort of respond to this incident, right? So log 360 gives you a certain amount of inbuilt workflows which you can very easily select and enable, right? So we have one to block the USB port. So I have this built-in workflow available to me, and I can very easily select it. And now you can see the entire alert setup, right? So you can see the flow over here. When this particular incident is detected during a non-working hour, I can immediately set up a workflow to block the USB port on that device. And I can obviously prevent any attacker from getting away with my sensitive data, right? So this is how I set it up. So now, just to give you an idea of how these workflows look, right? Now, a workflow is nothing but a sequence of steps that execute automatically when any particular incident is detected. So I'll just give you a look at how these workflows look, all right? So you see here the various built-in workflows that are available to you, and you can select any of them, right? You can enable and use any of these workflows to respond to any particular incident. But if you would like, you can also create your own workflow from scratch, all right? So you can click on create workflow, and this window over here basically allows you to create any kind of workflow that you would like. So you can see the list of actions available to you on this left menu over here, right? So you can either probably shut down a potentially affected system, you could restart it if you want, or you could block the USB port like we just saw, right? Or you could probably disable a particular user account, disable a particular computer, things like that. So you can create a very, very detailed flow of using all of these steps over here, right? So let's say you would like to maybe shut down a particular system, right? So when you add an action onto the workflow board, you just need to provide the specific details which it asks you for and click on OK. And so you've set up the first step in the workflow. Now, the good thing about workflows is that you don't need to have one particular sequence of steps, right? So you can even have a workflow which probably goes like step one, I would like to do this. And now if step one fails, I would like to execute one particular action. But if step one is successful, then I would like to go on to another action, right? So you can also branch out your workflows and create them as specifically as you would like. So now let's say that my shutting down of a particular system was not successful for some reason. Then I can probably retry the action, right? So if it fails, then I want to retry the action. And if it's successful, then I would like to send an email to the administrator, right? So in this way, you can very, very easily set up and create highly detailed workflows for any incident in your network, right? So this is basically how the overall incident workflow feature works, right? And if you would also like to track the execution of any workflow, you can always go over, click on view history and get the complete details of any workflow's execution. So this is basically how the incident response module works, right? So like I said, now we look at how you can track the status of any incident. So like I said, this is your main dashboard, which gives you an overview of all of the incidents happening in your network. So at any given time, you're likely to have maybe 100 open incidents, right? So now I'm the administrator and I would like to assign the responsibility for a particular incident to a particular operator or technician who can actually investigate and do something about that incident, right? So I can very easily just do it manually, maybe by clicking on the update icon here. So now I can assign this incident to a particular operator, right? So now when this operator logs into the console, he will be able to see the details of that incident, and then he can sort of update any relevant information about the incident over here. He can update the status of the incident, right? So now if I am the administrator, at any given time, I don't have to actually go over and talk to this operator. I don't have to waste my time sort of communicating and trying to find out the status of an incident. I can always very easily get the status by looking at this central dashboard over here, right? So like I said, you don't only have to do this manually. The good thing is when any incident occurs, you can also assign it to the relevant technician automatically by using certain incident rules, right? So you can do that over here by clicking on the assign rules button under the alert configurations tab here. So simply click on add rule, right? So now you can create a rule that says when a particular device or when a particular device group raises an alert, then I would like that incident to be assigned to a specific operator, right? Or if I can also say if a particular kind of incident happens, then I would like it to be assigned to another particular user. So you can create as many rules as you like. You can create, each rule can include as many conditions as you would like. And you can use all of these rules to ensure that any incident is always assigned to the right person, right? So all of these features that you saw just now are the built-in ticketing features available to you within the Log360 console. Now, another thing which Log360 does is it allows you to forward any security incidents information over to an external help desk if you have one, right? So you can just click on incident management and you can see all of the supported help desk software over here, right? So once you configure any particular external help desk, you can also basically forward the information about all of the security incidents or particular security incidents from Log360 over to these external help desk consoles, right? So you have these external features available to you as well, these external integration available to you as well. So all of this very easily helps you track the status of any incident, or it allows you to very seamlessly transfer information over to an external help desk. So you can always be sure that you are very efficiently managing the status of any incident happening in your network, right? So that is basically how a SIM solution helps you detect, investigate, and respond and manage any security incident in your network. So now we'll be taking any questions that you may have. Of course, before that, I also have a couple of quick poll questions for all of you. So it would be really helpful for us if you could answer these questions for us, right? So at the same time, if you have any questions, keep them coming via the live chat option, and we will be taking questions right now as well.